Cache-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to GeoGearHeads. This is a podcast about geocaching and all sorts of geolocation games. If you're new, then welcome to GeoGearHeads. And if you're a returning listener, we'd like to say welcome back, friend. Tonight we're going to be talking about quite a divisive topic on this, the 212th episode of GeoGearHeads. But I've been rude not to introduce myself. I'm the bad cop with Daryl W4 and our special guest tonight, Gary Slinkard of the Cache and Release podcast.
Well, we have this really interesting show about logging, and it kind of got kicked off by a few things. First, lots of people have been complaining about the TFTC logs and the seemingly blank logs, and most of those blank logs aren't actually blank. They have weird control sequences and characters in them to allow it to be blank, because believe it or not, geocaching.com does not let you submit a blank log. But the other thing was, I have a number of people now telling me they're either just not logging online at all, or they're only logging online if it's like an FTF or a really good cache or whatever. They're not logging all of the caches, which to me seems kind of weird. So we asked everyone who listens to the show to send us your feedback, and we got a ton of that feedback from the GeoGearHeads, but only one could win a prize from coinsandpins.com. So why don't we kick it off with that winner? And Gary, who was that?
Well, I don't know if I want to mention this one, but I guess I have to. Team Pugach won that package of logs from coinsandpins.com. And I guess we have a voicemail to listen from him.
Hey everyone, this is Daniel of Team Pugach. And as far as what region I come from, it's North 43, 37.855, West 70, 15.590. That's Portland, Maine for you laymen. Anyway, calling to let you know how I log my caches. I'm a smartphone cacher. I used to have a GPS. I've seen both sides of the world, and I prefer my phone. So I log all my caches in the moment, in the field. I use dictation, and then I carefully go back and spell and grammar check everything before I hit send.
Well, there you have it.
I said it like that just because Dano and I are friends, so that's why I did that.
Oh, that might change after that comment.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to say, I do much of the same that Dano does. And, there are certain words that voice dictation will never pick up right, like cache.
Hey, it picks it up, C-A-S-H.
There you go.
What's wrong with that?
Well, I didn't find any cache in the cache. And I've tried cache, but it puts the accent over the I haven't figured out how to get the C-A-C-H-E spelling to come out through voice dictation. But I keep
maybe try the Australian pronunciation. Try cache.
Cache.
See if that works.
Geocache.
Do catchy. I guess probably won't come in either.
Geocache actually works in at least the nuance dictation based ones. So I do geocache much more than if I'm writing it out. Normally if I'm writing or typing it out, it's just cache. But if I'm doing voice dictation, it's geocache. So that's a good sign that I'm using voice dictation if you see geocache in any of my logs.
Well, we've got, as Daryl said, we've got a ton of feedback. And still talking about voice dictation, we've got some feedback from JR and Juju.
Hi, this is Randy of JR and Juju. We live in Roswell, New Mexico. Yes, the home of the little green alien. We cache with an Oregon 450 and an Android phone using CGO. When we get back to the car, we will log our caches on CGO using the voice-to-text feature. Then we'll edit the text for any misspelled words. The only suggestion we have with this is to turn the radio down, or you get some very strange-looking text.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Now, Limax on that cache versus cache discussion says every so often he sees cache rather than cache show up on his Explorist.
Interesting.
Yeah, So I wonder if that's in the logs or what, that he's seeing the difference, the CASH versus CACHE. But yeah, that's definitely an issue. And I've seen some weird things happen with voice dictation myself, and I think anyone who's used it has done that. But we talked about it a little bit on the Patreon Hangout yesterday, Chris, that I'm really amazed at the Apple Watch, and I understand most, not all, but most of the Android Wear watches are the same way. The microphones in those and their tuning or whatever it is really seems to act better for the voice dictation, and I'm getting much quicker, more accurate responses out of it, unless I have to reboot because it gets, hosed.
Interesting. Daryl, do you get any of the Bluetooth lag that I get over any, Bluetooth, like in-ear device or car device?
Well, not really, because as I understand it, the voice processing is actually done in the watch, and there is actually an app that does allow you to do the voice memos right on the watch. There's only one that I know of, which we just talked about again yesterday, and I made another post. And it's kind of cool to play with that because you can see the difference between the microphone in the watch and the microphone in the phone. And you can do it for the iPad or whatever, too, because it's the same app that does all of those. Mm-hmm. But the voice processing, at least on the Apple Watch, is handled in the watch. And I thought that Android Wear did much the same thing. There's enough horsepower in there that it's better for them to handle the voice in the watch than to send that data to the phone for the translation. And if you start doing the Bluetooth audio, then you're definitely going to degrade the quality of that voice dictation. So I think that's a big part of the key there, is that you're doing that processing on, of the audio on the watch. I don't think they're actually doing the translation. I think it still goes out to the cloud, essentially, to do that. But it's the importance of having that done in the device rather than trying to stream the audio to do it.
Yeah, you would think it kind of needs to be on. You don't want it to go to another device to do it. I mean, it's kind of cool. The Apple Watch will do that.
Yeah. And the voice dictation in the Apple Watch does behave differently, and that's been kind of a little bit of a learning curve, especially going back and forth from the. I have the iPhone 6, not the 6S, the 6, and the 6S does behave a little bit differently too. So my understanding is a watch and the 6S are very similar in their behavior, but the 6 has that older processing that hasn't been updated like the watch has. It's getting to be a little bit squirrely, but we're talking about little minute differences between these. But if you're just using it, it's still not mature enough a product that you actually still notice these little it's and bits.
Kibbles and bits?
Yeah, no kibbles, just the bits.
Just the bits.
Let's go to another one that came in from Fish Out of Water, who logs very similar to what I do. She says, my logging habits vary depending on the type of caching I'm doing. I have several scripts/templates stored in GeoSphere and customize them for the day. If I'm doing a power trail, GeoArt, or something with large numbers, I rely on the templates heavily. I do personalize a log for good hides, unique experiences, maintenance needed, performed, and the like. When I grab a few caches on my own, I tend to mark them found in the app and log the finds at home. When I do this, the log tends to be custom for each find or DNF. Now, I am a huge fan of those templates in GeoSphere. I do have some of the automation happening on mine, for like the find number of the day. I have especially a lot of HTML that I built into those. Actually, it was the UBB code, not the HTML, but the links, because I wanted to link to whomever I'm with, or in the case of an event, I'd build a template for that event and link to the event so that it was really easy for anyone to go back and see whom I went caching with or what event I was at. So when you're getting into that level of detail, it's really impossible to do from the phone. And that's where it's really nice to have that template. And I have I have quite a few templates at the end of my list that are called stamp and then the cacher name. So all I have to do is, I can be talking, I can be doing keyboarding on the stupid little phone keyboard, and just hit that, and it inserts the stamp, in addition to having all of the other templates that have all the automation and everything. So a lot of the time, I just hit the basic template and, pick a point, insert, do voice dictation. Sometimes I do mostly voice dictation and just put the timestamp and that kind of stuff in. But I really like having the timestamps on my logs. That comes from early on when I used to do a lot more first to find hunting.
Wow.
And even the stuff that wasn't necessarily first to find, you'd get in a typical Saturday 4 or 5 people visiting the same cache because there's not that many caches out there. Now we have tons of caches, so it's not that common. But I always liked going back, and even in the paper logs, I was logging the time when I first started. But it's really cool to go back and say, hey, these people were here, half an hour before me, or 2 hours before me. So I just like having the time.
Even if you weren't first to find, you'd still put the time.
Well, exactly, because it's just one of those things. You always get other people hitting it, and on the Saturday, you usually got people hitting it the same day. Sometimes on the Sunday. Now, you've got so many of the caches that it's not as robust or not as active as it used to be. So,
as a cache owner, I do appreciate that. We'll get into logging completely, but the more that if you own a cache, and I think every cache geocacher should own a geocache, because I think you really learn a lot, and something I mentioned the other day. But you should put more in it. We'll talk about that in a little more. But yeah, I think putting not only the date but the time is really cool for a cache owner to see that and go, oh,
well,
that's
the date is automatically there with the log.
Well,
it just doesn't have the time. So that's the one bit of information that I tend to add. And it's weird because they do actually have the timestamps on those logs, but they don't show them to you because you don't know when someone's been logging it. So the timestamps are kind of irrelevant unless you're doing the live logging, at which point they actually have a fair representation of when you actually logged it.
Right.
Now the catch is, I'm using a lot of the UBB code, and about a week ago, Groundspeak or geocaching.com announced they're going to get away with it, or get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary, you want to fill us in on what they said about that?
I'll read that. Very interesting. Caching logs switching from HTML to Markdown. In our continued effort to increase site security and promote cross-platform compatibility, we will be removing support for HTML and UBB code in logs in favor of Markdown on February 2nd, 2016. These codes are used to add emphasis to text such as bold or italic type, or to add links to websites. HTML and UBB code may not always look exactly as you intended them to on some devices, while Markdown will consistently look good across all devices. The change affects fewer than, I don't know how they know this, but they say it affects fewer than 3.5% of existing logs, which will now display any old HTML and UBB code. Note that starting to use Markdown now will ensure logs display properly following the transition. Why aren't we converting old logs? They ask, or answered their own question. Our tech team discussed the possibility of cleaning up old logs. Unfortunately, the risk associated with altering, scrubbing, and I was kind of amazed at this, we talked about it on our show, was 560 million geocaching logs, not counting trackables, is too high to run any kind of cleanup without some bad consequences, i.e. loss of data, corruption, etc. Therefore, we are recommending that users convert their own logs. All 560 million of them.
Yeah, so there's no chance I'm going and converting my logs. Thank you.
Is that 560 million the 3.5% of existing logs?
Yeah. Well, my thought when I saw that is,
billion.
You're dealing with UBB code and with HTML, and I don't expect you'll see anything that's going to do a really good job, especially with some of the inconsistencies that you'll get when people are hand coding that stuff in. So I could really see the conversion messing everything up.
Yeah.
So no big surprise there, but I kind of thought that when I first read this article that actually it was a post in the forums that I saw. I kind of got the impression that they were going to flip the switch that on that date, any new logs were going to be rendered in the Markdown, and anything before that would be rendered with the old engine. But they are actually switching the render engine, so yeah. But it meant that I had to go and figure out Markdown. I was aware of Markdown and just never used it, and so I had to go and figure it out.
Yeah, I was not familiar with Markdown a lot. So what, other than the fact it's a WYSIWYG, is there anything else about Markdown that's...
Well, it's not WYSIWYG.
Okay.
They are going to have a WYSIWYG editor, and this is going to make people really happy, is if you go to the cache page and log your finds that way, you will have a WYSIWYG template or editor, just like you have for so many of the other things on the site now. And the HTML is really, really tough to do in one of those WYSIWYG editors. One of the problems that I keep running into is I have ampersands in a lot of the URLs, and those ampersands are converted in those WYSIWYG editors to ampersand AMP semicolon, that they'll render as the ampersand.
Right.
And there's really no good way to parse that and figure out what it's supposed to be. So that's, I think, a big reason why they're switching to the Markdown, because from what I can see, it's probably less susceptible to those kind of issues. But what the UBB code or the Markdown code is, it will really confuse anyone who knows UBB or HTML. So to give you an example, and we'll throw a link in the website too, or in the show notes too, to a website that will help you play with it. There's a little Java-based engine on there, so you can experiment with it, and they have a whole bunch of help in there about different codes. So if you put an asterisk on both sides of a word, that word is italicized. So one asterisk on either side italicizes that phrase. Even you can do it for multiple words. 2 asterisks makes it bold. 3 asterisks makes it bold and italicized. So you have to put the same number of asterisks on either side. But let's say you want to have like a whole string that's bold and italicized, and then only one word italicized in the end or something. You could do 3, do your 2, and then do your 1 at the end.
Oh, gosh.
So it is nested very much like the others, but it's confusing because asterisks are what you're using. You're not using the B's or the I's or anything like that. But that is the most logical version. Where it gets really strange is when you get into like the links and the images. So this is what really drove me nuts trying to go and do the conversion on all my templates, which I did today. I exported all my templates from GeoSphere, edited them on the text editor on the computer, and then brought them back in, which makes it a lot easier than trying to do it on this stupid little editor built in, especially because GeoSphere hasn't been updated to use the iPhone 6 screen, so the cursor selections are really, really wonky. But to do a link, your URLs, what you have to do is in the brackets, so these are those hard right angle brackets, you put your link, so like podcast, whatever you want the text of the link to be goes there. Then immediately following, no spaces, in parentheses, you put the actual URL.
Okay.
So it'd be like open bracket, podcast, close bracket, open parenthesis, http://www.geogearheads.com, close parenthesis. That's how you get your link.
Wow. Okay.
Just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. To me, that really freaks me out because it's so different. It gets completely away from the whole nesting thing.
It's like learning Linux. If you've never used Linux, it's and you come from like I did, from a Windows/DOS world, learning Linux was very maddening.
Yeah, but that's based on Unix, which was around a long time before
Yes.
DOS was.
Yeah, Linux/Unix. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what if you do put a space? What does it do? Do you know what it does in Markdown to that? If you
I
look at
think if
podcast
you
space.
Yeah, I think if you do that, it just renders it out without
Okay.
without turning it into a link. However, I think that's highly dependent on what engine they're using to render.
Oh boy.
So it's unpredictable results, I think, if you do the spaces. But if you want to insert the inline images, it's almost exactly the same context, which that I was kind of happy with. But instead of just doing the brackets to start off, you have to put an exclamation mark, or a bang is
a bang.
Yeah, as most computer savvy folks will know. So you start off with that exclamation mark, and then in the brackets you put the alternate text. So it's that text that shows up if the image can't load or that kind of thing, and then the URL to the image. So I think that's not so tough, but I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be linking to images rather than including them inline because they're going to forget the bang, or they're going to put the space in the front. It's like,
That's if they log anything at all. As in, lately, I am so frustrated as a cache owner. I'm sick and tired of reading a log that's blank, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, well, and actually, Limax wondered if the switch from HTML UBB code will take care of the blank logs. And my thought? No. Because they're still going to do the same thing. Yeah, there was one of the logs that someone had submitted to me about 7-8 months ago saying, how can you do these blank logs? This is ridiculous. So I went back and checked. Well, they had a bold space character. That's all they did. So with the BB code, or with the Markdown code, you're still going to be able to do the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to fix it. It would be nice.
No, it's not going to fix it.
No. But it might.
Put a 10-word minimum in a log.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily a good answer either.
50-word minimum? 100.
50? No.
We get gibberish, Chris. I seriously.
Oh, yeah.
West Coaster
works of William Shakespeare.
White Coaster says it's always best to start off with a bang, though.
Start off with a bang, absolutely.
Only if you're putting a picture in do you start off with a bang.
Right. But the Markdown stuff is not as likely to be used when you're live logging, unless you have something like the field notes, the copy and paste logs, that kind of stuff, or the templates. I meant, not the field notes.
Yeah.
But if you're going back to the computer, I think that's when people are going to do it. And the voicemail from the next caller kind of sounds like someone who might be doing that.
Hey guys, this is Jeff Arbaugh, or Antaeus, just calling in to let you guys know how I log caches. I usually use the iPhone's, the geocaching.com official app on the iPhone. And when I find a bunch of caches, or maybe just a few, I save them to my offline found it list in the official app, and then later on I go and to my computer, reference my list, and log my caches. That may be the same day, or maybe a day or two later. For those that aren't familiar with the saved lists on the official app, you can create one from any cache. Just press the ellipsis button on the top right and choose to save offline list. You can create a new one or save to an existing list. However, if I actually got an FTF on a cache, I try to log it immediately. Sometimes it's not so immediate, though, as I may have to get to work, or I may have a little one to deal with, but I log it as quickly as possible.
All right. Well, the field notes stuff was really popular when you went back to the GPSRs, and we already kind of talked about that a little bit with some of the other guys. But remember, Chris, in the early days of apps on smartphones, that's also how you were getting the logs out of the smartphone apps, was through the caches.txt files.
Exactly.
Or fieldnotes.txt files.
Yep, and you'd upload that through geocaching.com and through the official website, and off you go.
Yeah.
Did y'all notice? Did y'all interpret a little bit of Jeff's email or voicemail there that he's doing first to finds with his daughter before work? Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem there. Go ahead.
I don't see anything odd there.
Okay, I don't either.
Yeah, his daughter will resent him eventually. It happens to all of us. No, I've spent some time with Antaeus, and he's got quite a drive to take his daughter to school, so it works out for him.
Yeah, and FTF's inevitable.
Exactly. We have more feedback. This one is from Stephen W54. He says, I currently use the CGeo application for geocaching, but I tend to use the application to record notes about my finds. Then I compose full logs while using a computer with a large screen. I've been convinced, and this is a good term, I've been convinced that a log should include a summary of one's experience finding the cache. For me, it's easier to use a computer with a large screen and a full-size keyboard than to use my cell phone to compose such a log. After logging a find, I usually delete the geocache from CGeo, although I do often keep geocaches that are good for dropping off travel bugs and geocoins. That's not a bad technique.
No, and this gets into why I like to use the voice dictation. If I have to go back and log after the fact, it ends up that it sits there too long, and I've forgotten what I wanted to write, so I just go with whatever my default log was. So if I put those notes in the field, yeah, I can usually expand on it, but the simple fact is I almost never get around to it. So using that voice dictation means I write better, longer logs. Yeah, it is kind of tricky, and as Limax says, he has a love-hate relationship with Siri. As a result, he doesn't do much of the voice dictation. So it is something to kind of watch out for.
It is, but I find it's better. I'd rather go back and edit a few words than type out the whole thing on the smartphone.
Oh, absolutely. It's just really tough to type that stuff out on the smartphone. So that's why you see people with those templates, the copies. I've run into a few people who are doing Evernote or Notepad apps, that kind of stuff, with some basic logs that they copy and paste and then just do minor tweaks to them. Mm-hmm. And again, if you do those kind of things, you can type them up on the computer and transfer it to the smartphone.
Now, one thing that helps me out is the fact that when I go geocaching, I always have Slinky Mama along. So what we do is we'll sort of team effort it. So as we're going along and going to the next cache or whatever, we kind of are you going to log it? Do you want me to log it? And so a lot of times I'll drive, she'll log it, and then by that time we'll get to the next cache and we kind of keep the process going. But if you're doing it by yourself, you need the tools.
So it kind of gets into the power caching thing where you have one person designated as the logger for the whole group. And again, that's where those field note files really came in handy, because one person could create that field note file and send it to everyone else. But most of the apps that support the API, at least, do not create that field note file anymore. So that's a little frustrating. So especially in those groups, that's one of the reasons I like to take out Geosphere, because I'll create my logs and then I send that field notes file to anyone else who wants it, just as an email.
Right.
And I'll actually send that file out every so often during the day, like save it to Dropbox, email it to myself, whatever is most convenient at the time, so that I'll have a backup should something happen, because I don't submit those logs in the field usually. Because that does give me a chance when I'm sitting down at the rest area waiting for the rest of the party to come out, to just go back, review, and make sure that they're all good. And in some cases I'll go and submit them from dinner or whatever. But
Right.
I do like to go through and take that second pass. All right, well, we have more voicemails, and this is a halfway point of the voicemails, guys. I love it. We got so many good voicemails this time.
This is Deborah, also known as Doc Firewoman, from Arkansas. And I was calling to give you some feedback about how both I and my boyfriend log our caches, period. We do use smartphones when we cache. He has an Android and I have an iOS smartphone. I prefer to log as I go and save them and save for later. So what I will do is I will record a few notes and then save for later so I can go back and write a more meaningful log for the cache owner. He, on the other hand, doesn't like doing that because on his device, the paid app only saves the GC number and not the title, and sometimes it's kind of hard to remember about the cache since the title isn't there. So he likes to log as he goes. And so he'll type out a full log and send it at each place we stop. So it's just a little bit of difference in how we both log our caches, but we both try to write good, meaningful logs for the cache owners because we know that that's part of the fun of doing this. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm used to doing voice to text.
Yeah, I did notice that period. That's one of the things is as soon as you start doing that voice to text, it seems like you start doing that when you leave voicemails.
I love it.
Daryl, what are you talking about? ?
Yeah, I did that more than once, unfortunately. Yeah, if you don't have anyone talking back to you and you're just talking to this dead end, you just assume that you're in voice to text mode.
I love it. I love it.
Gary, you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah. Next one is from Left Rick H. I mostly use my iPhone, as I do, for geocaching, so a lot of my logging is simply done right there on the spot. On occasion, I do have to bust out the Garmin. Yep, me too. And when I do that, of course, I do log in at a workstation and record my finds. I like the way he puts this, I almost always log DNFs. You should have put I always log DNFs, but that's another story and for another day, so that the CO knows when there may be an issue with the cache.
All right, I will say on the logging of DNFs, the always part is highly dependent for me because there are a number of caches that I don't want to say that they're missing, but because I don't think I've put in enough effort and I just don't have the time or energy to continue with the hunt. So
Sure.
In those cases, I don't log a DNF.
Now, will you write a note?
It depends, but usually not.
Okay.
It really depends on what's going on, because there are some that I've put in a significant amount of effort, but I'm still not sure. So I will put a note, and especially if it's like I've given up because of muggle activity.
Yeah.
I do my timestamp with a note so that other people might know. Well, 3 o'clock on this corner isn't a necessarily good time because all of the kids are getting out of school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will log a DNF, but I make very clear, and this is something, again, as a cache owner, you really appreciate, and that is I will log a DNF, but I will not, unless I really think, like really, really, like unbelievably, really think that it's not there. I will just put that I didn't have any luck today. I searched, it's probably there. I'm just sucking at geocaching today, or something to that effect. But it's good to let the cache owner at least know, because it may not be my log, but it may be the third person that comes along and says, I had no luck today, that might trigger, at least for me as an owner, that triggers for me, I got to get out there and look. So.
Yeah, I agree. I've done DNFs where, I'll admit, hey, just, wasn't jiving with it today. I can't find this thing. I'm not saying it's not there. And there's other times I simply don't put a DNF in because I only had 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It took me longer to get there, or, the person I was waiting for got ready early and was like, I don't have the time to put in a sufficient find or time to say that it's not there. So.
Well, and there's another case where I won't post a DNF log, and that's when there's like 5, 6, 7 DNF logs that date back a year or more with no finds in between.
Mm-hmm.
When that's the case, it's like, okay, the cache owner obviously doesn't care anymore. I'm just out of here.
Right.
It's not worth my effort to hit the voice dictation and say couldn't find it.
Will you break out the needs maintenance?
No.
After a year, I would.
No, I typically don't, unless it's extreme circumstances.
Okay.
But I have actually emailed the reviewer a few times about a cache, saying, hey, this cache hasn't been found in a while, or it needs maintenance. I've not been able to get a hold of the cache owner. Do you want to do something about it? I don't tend to like to put the needs archived on there, and needs maintenance I typically reserve just for if I know where the cache had been and it's not there. Like if you find the zip tie with like the bottom of the cache container and nothing else.
Right.
I've found a few of those, and then I'll put the needs maintenance.
Or a chunk of Velcro stuck to underneath a bench and nothing attached to it.
Right.
Yeah.
The nice brass hook that's hanging in the side of the fence.
I will break glass and deliver the needs maintenance very rarely, but once in a while I think it is good to do that, and I've done the other I've only done it 2 or 3 times probably, and this is my 10th year of geocaching, the needs archive. So I agree with y'all.
I throw out needs maintenance. Here in the Northwest we get a lot of rain. So when I pull out a container and I dump water out of it and try to dry off the log, that's a need maintenance.
Yeah.
Out here with a new container, new log, something's got to happen.
Yeah. Now, Wet Coaster says that he only logs a DNF if he puts in what he considers real effort to find it.
Okay.
And then Deborah piped in. Is this Doc Firewoman, maybe?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Hi, sorry to jump in mid-show. I am the same. I will only log a DNF if I have made an effort. Some days I just don't feel it. I also log when there is evidence. So I think she's talking about the same thing.
Okay.
And we got another live Q&A response from Wet Coaster. What about a cache that has the needs maintenance attribute set, but all of the logs over the last year are saying it's in good shape, basically a lazy cache owner not removing the attribute after they do maintenance?
Oh, yes.
Now
Or
that is an
uninformed.
excellent point. Yeah, I was going to say I don't want to say it's lazy, because in order to remove that, you have to post the log that you've done maintenance.
Yeah, you have to do owner maintenance, yes.
Right. So that's another type of logging that I hadn't even considered talking about on the show. The cache owners have to do some logging on their own. So anytime I go out and do maintenance on a cache, whether it's just checking on it or whatever, I post a maintenance log on it so that people know I've been there and touched up on it. Now, if I just go and check on it, sometimes I'll post a note, sometimes I won't. It really depends on the cache. Like a nano cache, if I just go and check, oh yeah, the cache is still there, there's room in the log, I won't post anything. But if I go and check on a cache that's got room for travelers, I'll go check on it, see what travelers are in there, post a note that I've done it, and mark any of the travelers that aren't in the cache as missing.
Chris and Darrell, that's a whole other show you need to make a note of, is cache owner maintenance. That's a good show.
Yeah.
I look forward to that in the future.
Yeah, well, we could probably do a whole show about just the logging of the cache owners,
Yes. That's good stuff.
Oh, wow, we got a whole bunch more posts in here. Let's see. Well, we'll go back to Doc Firewoman. Yeah, when it is missing, but there is evidence, it is gone. And I think that is a newbie hider fault sometimes, that they don't know to do that type of log. So yeah, it's not really obvious, and I kind of wish that as those need maintenance logs came in, they would do something on the cache page to tell you, in big banner, because you try to list a new cache now. If one of yours needs maintenance, it tells you, hey, are you sure you want to list this cache because you have this other one that needs maintenance?
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so maybe just a nice banner at the top of the page that says, "Hey, you have this cache that needs maintenance. If you've attended to it, write a maintenance log
Click
on
here
it."
for
Yeah,
owner maintenance log.
Exactly.
Right.
That might be a little too much, because then I could see people just clicking there and writing, everything's in good shape, and then submitting without doing any maintenance.
Yeah.
So there's downsides to it as well, but maybe like the first time that you get a needs maintenance log or the first time in a year that you've gotten it, put a little reminder in the notification to the cache owner or something. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, to figure out how to make this stuff work without some of the nasty side effects of it. But I think it's probably worth the risk because so many people don't understand the maintenance log. And Sydney, I think this is actually
Shermanator.
Yeah, Shermanator 18. Agreed, Daryl. The site should tell you if any of your caches need maintenance, and that you need to post an owner maintenance log to clear the attribute. Now, here's another question: how many people are actually going to the website anymore?
Oh, I do. I'm old school.
Yeah, but most of the newer cachers are only hitting it through the apps, and it's not the official apps most of the time.
Right. And that gets frustrating from a cache owner perspective because I'd like to communicate once in a while with people, and I go to the messaging board and they've never logged in, and so it doesn't show that they have an email address. Now, fortunately, we can message now, which is good, but back in the day, for a while there, you couldn't even contact them. And it's like...
Right, until they had confirmed their email address.
Yes, exactly.
You couldn't contact them, and that was the whole reason for that, I shouldn't say the whole reason. That was the big motivation for having the message center, is that now you could deal with these new cachers who came on and hadn't verified. But we're over 40 minutes into the show, and we've got so much going on.
Keep going. Sorry.
Let's go on. This is great though. Let's get to our next voicemail.
This is Adam Dimshar or Terry Killer, and the way that I typically log is right on my smartphone. I do like to use the GPSR, and then once I get back to the car, I'll do my log on the app. That's not always the case. Sometimes I will wait till I get home and write something up on the computer. Take, for instance, this past weekend, I was in Atlanta doing a GeoArt. We got 70-something odd caches that day. I wasn't constantly writing logs. I was just taking notes of these are the ones we've done, and once I got home, I logged them all. And all the GeoArts pretty much got the same log, but anything unique, I would try and make some kind of note of it to give it a unique log.
All right. Gary, why don't you jump into the next email? This seems really old school now after all these voice messages.
It does, but I'm old school, so I appreciate this. This is from Team Mavachju. I'm sorry, I butchered that. For the container logbook itself, I am generally pretty boring. Just the date and my name. Not even my caching name, just my real name. If I'm with others, they will get their name added. When I have found a cache, generally I grab a photo or two of the area. I like that. If it's worth it, and mark the cache as found. In Geosphere, I used to highlight them to indicate them as being found, but I also used that for puzzle multi-caches I had in progress, so that confused pretty fast, as I'm confused. In my current geocaching app, I have increased the options to highlighted, in progress, and found to avoid this confusion. When I'm in a place where I can be at peace, I will go through the list of found ones to log them properly. If there's a story for the day, they'll be generally copied and pasted at the top of every log comment. After that, there'll be something about that particular container, cache, companions, or location. At the end of any travel, bug information will be added. And I really appreciate that. But, it's interesting. I have never thought about putting my actual name physically on the log, and that's something that I've seen people do. And
Daryl does it all the time.
Daryl does, okay.
I do.
Yes.
Daryl W4.
Well, but that's your caching name.
Scott Burks does it all the time.
Yeah, Scott Burks does.
Chris.
Oh, sorry.
Do you ever wite Chris, or
Never.
do you write only the bad cop?
The bad cop on Nanos, I put TBC.
TBC, okay. I always put G-Slink, and if for those that ever find anything that's a nano, for us it's GS and SM for Slinky Mama. But I'm going back to this. As a cache owner, I don't check them. There's one cache of all my 100 or something caches I own. There's one cache that I care about. It's because it's a decoy. And what I do is I literally check what's on the log to make sure that it matches up it's in the geocaching.com site. And I have to admit this, I have deleted logs because they claim they found it, but there's no evidence that they found it. Very rarely, and I always send them a message and I say, I'm very sorry, I've deleted it. Please, and most of them will go back and actually find it. But these people tend to give up on. They'll find the decoy, and then for whatever reason they gave up and they claim they had the find. And that's the only one I'm real picky about.
Gary,
Yeah,
you did a good job of channeling your inner bad cop there.
Thank you. I always think, what would the bad cop do in this situation?
Just delete the log. Don't say anything.
Oh no.
But see, now,
We should also mention, though, before we get emails asking what his new caching app is, that's the app that he's created, but he can't submit to the App Store or anything because the API has been locked down, and therefore he can't create an app to actually talk to the geocaching.com site right now.
Oh, okay.
So if he signs his real name, not his caching name, and an owner goes back and audits the logs, they have the right to delete his log because, his caching name didn't show up on the log. They may not know who he is.
Well, and you run into the same kind of problems when you log as a team name. When
That's
I go
true.
out with a group of cachers, we'll usually pick a team name.
My notes. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've had cache owners who have given me a hard time about it. I think it was only once, but I know I've heard of other people who have had this problem, where if you put in the logs, they start emailing you. Did you really find that?
Well,
they don't like the team names. But my big thing is, you're going to complain that we put one space on your log instead of 8 or 10 or
Exactly.
whatever.
We didn't fill up your log today. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind the team name, and I usually you can figure it out. And usually if it's a date, like if the person before them found it and the person after them found it, I can figure out who the person in the middle was more than likely. It's pretty rare that I've had people find a cache, although, Daryl, I think this may be becoming more common, where they physically put their name on the log but not log it in geocaching.com.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things that kicked this off is, I hear a lot of people at the local meet and greets. I've talked with some people around doing the same thing is, it's just not worth my effort to log most of these caches online.
We had Steve from the Travel Bugs on a couple weeks ago, and he says that he has a cache, and it's a large cache, which is nice. But in the log, he has a guy who comes every year and writes a little story takes a page out of his little notepad, and the guy's not on, he's not a geocacher. I mean, he doesn't appear to be a geocacher, but he finds it, makes a note. So I don't know that's that common, but anyway, it's interesting.
We do have a note from John here that he usually writes in the log, signed as, then the team name when he does that.
Yeah.
And that's the only time that I've ever gotten any headaches is when I do that. But I always do that when I sign as a team name. And a lot of the time what I do with those templates I was talking about earlier is I'll have the team name and then in parentheses each of the cachers that I was with. So that way there's no question.
Right.
And that has helped to cut down, I think, the number of questions. What we had also done it is MCCM, Motor City Cache Machine, is our caching name, and we had a website. And Shermanator says that that's what she does as well. All right, so let's move on to Code Junkie.
Code Junkie says, for logging, I make extensive use of field notes. I have the Let me start over from Code Junkie, because they say for logging, I make extensive use of field notes to log caches after the fact. I'm not a fan of logging from the field for a variety of reasons. For example, it's impersonal, it gives away my location, etc.
And that disclosure of location had been a huge point of contention several years ago, but it seems like no one really cares anymore. The Foursquare had been a big issue. The Gowalla services. Even Wallaby has the option to hide your location, hide your activity. Now it seems like people just kind of expect that information is public, but what was it, about 6 years ago? We started hearing about some thefts based on social media posts. And
Please Rob Me site?
Yeah, and the Please Rob Me site was about 5 years ago. We had done a show about the security online way back in the beta days. So, it is a real thing. There was at least one journalist who was robbed while he was away at a conference, I think in Vegas. And it was eventually confirmed that they had watched his social media to figure out when he was out of town. And around that same time, there were a lot of people who had Facebook posts. We're away at this party, and that was a big issue for years. But now it just seems like no one really cares.
I'm on my way to this party, and I had to leave my large pit bull at home alone.
Yeah. And Doc Firewoman said that she's never thought about that, honestly, giving away your location. Yeah. And she caches alone a lot, so that could be a concern. And that's a really good reason to save those logs for later. Well, and admittedly, that's one of the reasons why I do that.
Yes and no. If you're caching alone, it's good to actually post your logs when you're out so people know at least where you have been.
Right.
But if I'm on vacation, I purposely don't post logs until I get back home. I don't want people to know, hey, I'm away. Look, I've just logged a cache in Florida. Obviously, I'm not home right now.
Well, and one of my big issues with the logging immediacy is with travelers. And we talked about it a little bit last week. When it comes to travelers, it kind of changes my logging, because if I'm picking up a traveler that's there, I try to log a little quicker than I normally would. But the traveler retrieval logs, I don't have to worry about, because they don't really show your location. It's just the traveler. Retrieve the traveler.
Retrieve it from this cache.
Right, but it doesn't show up as on your finds. It doesn't show up. So it takes a little bit more work to find those kind of logs. So I really don't worry about it. But that's also one of the reasons why when I drop a traveler, I do try to, by the end of the day, like 4 or 5 hours later at the most, try to post those logs so that it's in the cache, so that the next person doesn't have to worry about it. Mm-hmm. All right, we got more voicemails.
Hi, this is Shermanator 18. I'm from the central New York area. I'm calling to tell you how I log caches. If I'm going on a long trip and finding a lot of caches, I tend to use my GPS and then use GSAC to log all of them at the same time. If I'm just finding a few caches or not taking a long trip, I will cache with my phone and write my logs at the same time that I'm finding the caches.
Yeah, now those field note text files that we were talking about on and off are really great, and like I said, most of the current apps don't do it. And I use those as backups. But the other thing that I didn't really mention is GSAC, because a lot of people take those field note files into GSAC and then run them through macros to handle the logging. And White Coaster had asked earlier in the live Q&A about GSAC handling those new Markdown formats. My guess is it's not going to have a problem submitting them, but you are going to need an update to actually view them correctly.
Well, we've got more, this time from Brylang. He says, I use GC Droid for geocaching. Every time I mark a cache as found in the app, it gets added to the logs and field notes feature in the app. When I return to a data connection of some sort, each log is also uploaded to the field notes feature on geocaching.com. I treat this like a backup. Once I get home and have some time, I export my finds from GC Droid and save them on Dropbox. This exports a geocache_visits.txt file, which then I can import into GSAC's published logs feature. From there, I can write my logs, add photos, log travel bugs, and finally submit everything to geocaching.com. He does something a little different for FTFs. He says, my FTF logging procedure or process is this. When I'm on site and have returned the cache to its hiding spot, I write a short note in GC Droid and click the checkbox to submit it as a log immediately. I usually write something like FTF at this time, more later. When I get home, I use my main logging process to redo my log with more about my adventure. This way, the CO gets 2 logs from me, but I delete the more later log when I'm done. It also serves to let other geocachers know that the FTF has been claimed.
That is a good cacher.
Yeah, and I've actually had some cache owners request that the first to finds not log right away because it does tend to discourage people from finding the cache. And yeah, for a long time that was the case. But to me, I don't want to go running around to find a cache that's already been found, and I get a little annoyed if I get there only to find that someone found it 40 minutes before me.
So if you're second to find, Daryl, you don't want to find it.
No, I don't. No, it's a matter of if I'm going to go find it at that point, I'll go out when I'm hitting the rest and have the time to prepare.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the thing was too, the reason I got into the first to find so much, 8 years ago or whatever, is because we had a whole bunch of us that were going out for every first to find, and we'd have impromptu events at each of these caches. My favorite one is we had a dozen cachers standing at a light pole in a hotel parking lot at midnight talking for an hour.
You can mark it as 2, like an event and a first to find.
Exactly.
Now, did everybody get a first to find on that?
Well, only the people that actually were there when they first signed it got the first to find. Not all dozen of them. I think it was 3 or 4 people. Usually you'd have 2 or more teams that would show up about the same time. So whoever's there to find it initially got it. And none of us were that competitive over the first to find. It was more the whole game of the first to finds.
Just the obsession of 2 a.m. in the morning finding a skirt lifter.
Yeah, well, we didn't do that very often.
Okay.
Now, I knew of a person who wouldn't go find a cache if he wasn't first to find. If he came in and somebody was there, he'd turn around and drive away.
Oh,
really?
I've
come
actually,
all the way out and just sign it.
I've actually done that where if I see someone at the first to find, I'll move on, but that's because there's potentially another first to find down the road.
Oh, okay.
It's all about getting the advantage over that person for the next first to find. By the way, that usually doesn't work.
Well, we have more feedback this time from Tangent. Gary, would you read that?
Yes, Tangent. I keep my logs current because I'm kind of a statistics junkie. When I'm out caching, I double device, use my eTrex to find the cache and my smartphone in airplane mode to show cache info and to log field notes. Typically, I add at most a word or 2 to the default field note text while I'm out in the field. I'd rather cache than play with the cell phone keyboard. Okay, I get you. I rarely write anything more than the date and my caching name on a paper log. Okay. On occasion, I'll add a short note like left a TB if it's a larger notebook type log. In the evenings, I let my phone sync, pull up my laptop, go through the field notes, and write up decent logs for each cache. Bad cop. I prefer to do this each night so my memory is fresh. I almost always write at least a sentence, and imaginative caches can get paragraphs. That's wonderful. I don't do the cut and paste trip description style log some other folks do. Each log is written individually.
So Tangent doesn't like me very much.
Well, and this is something we talked about before the show, and that is...
It depends on the type of cache for me.
If you're with a group, I can, in my opinion, if you're with a group, I can kind of see writing a generic portion to the log. If you're by yourself and you're doing 35 caches in an evening or something, I kind of want to see you write something for each cache. I know that's difficult, but Chris, I know you look at it a little bit differently, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It's one of those things that, if it's good, yeah, I'm gonna write a cache out for it. And I will always put something. Don't get me wrong, I'm never gonna put TFTC, or I'm gonna put, hey, I found this is, part of this or that or the other thing. And by the way, your cache container and log are in good shape.
That to me is really good. If
so,
the log
Gary,
is wet, I want to know that. Go ahead. Sorry.
My average log length is 30 words.
That is awesome.
My longest being 692. Thank you, project-gc.com.
Yes.
I love that attribute.
Now,
but one of my questions was, how many of these larger logbooks is he finding? Because most of the logbooks that I run into now don't even have the room. So, I totally get how he's not writing
across
this.
Several just recently where, you open them up and they, instead of just putting time and date or date and name, they've put in, traded out this car travel bug for, Squishy Melvin or whatever travel bug they picked up.
Squishy Melvin.
Well, and there was
Squishy
a
Melvin.
time
Yeah,
in which on every cache logbook, I would actually write, TNSL kind of thing,
Yep.
Now, I almost never do.
Mm-mm. I just
How
log
times have changed.
the date and name.
I just happen to have several logs here.
Just happen.
All to have
all
these
nicely protected.
awfully nicely protected. Not bad. I mean, but
Date and name. Date and name. Date and name.
Date and name. But again, these weren't big enough to.
Date and name. Oh.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, but.
Did that come from your scrapbook?
Yeah, I keep them. I'm weird. I keep all these, unless they're completely destroyed, and I try to dry them out. But I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of logs where I've got. I need more. I'd like to have more ammo cans out in the field. I just don't have enough places to put ammo cans anymore. So
you have to be creative.
You do.
You've got a lot of space underground.
Now, I think it would be cool if somebody would whoever owns Project Ape in Brazil. I heard that book, 'cause I've seen pictures of it, but wouldn't it be great to thumb through that log book? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I always wanted to try putting the scans of the logs on file, on the cache page for each of my caches, but the image downsampling just absolutely kills it on the geocaching.com site, so you'd have to host it somewhere else, and I really don't know that many people will care that much. However, when I've gotten some of those, hey, we found this box in the woods, here's us, that I've actually taken photos of and posted with my logs and that kind of stuff, because I do find those really cool.
Yeah.
Well, should we go on?
I think we should, because we're over an hour now.
Yeah. So let's just keep going. We'll get through this. If you've listened to it this long, thanks. Listen some more, because we've got more good feedback. This time coming from Wet Coaster. He says, I rarely log using my phone. I would rather be moving along to the next cache instead of writing a short story on how fantastic the trip was to find that cache. I think I said that more sarcastically than he intended it. If it was truly memorable, I'll be able to write a good log entry about it. If not, the log will be some general comments about the placement of the cache or area or what condition the cache is in, and thanks to the CO for hiding the cache. Now, if he's anything like me, I can't remember what I just ate for dinner. So, you come, yeah, I found a cache today. Hooray for me.
Yeah.
I despise those, hooray for me, or another one for me.
Yeah.
What's the point in that? Obviously, You found it. We know that.
Oh my gosh, how many found its I have, especially lately. I need to do a class or something in the area because I'm getting, I should say tired of it. My Slinky Mama says, don't worry about it. They found it. You should be happy. It's like, I am happy, but I'd like to hear more than that's one more find for me. Great.
Yeah.
Good for you. Glad you found it.
Yay for you. It's all about you. So glad you found it. Anyway, speaking about you, there's no you in Limax.
Hello,
How was-
Daryl and Chris. This is Climax. I log in a variety of different ways depending on my circumstances. I still actually do keep a paper log of all of the caches that I have found. It is behind at this point, mainly because I've been doing a lot of caching with my phone lately. I'll get into that here in a bit. I also have a separate notebook that I keep for puzzle caches and other things that I have solved. Also, waypoints to multi-caches and things of that nature. When it comes to actually logging my finds, it depends on what kind of a day I have had. If I am logging purely with my GPS, then I will actually say found in the GPS, and if I don't feel like I'm in a rush, i.e. I'm caching alone, which is actually most of the time, I will actually make a note in my paper log, say if it is up to date at that point, to say, okay, here's the date, here's the cache name, here's the cache code, and if I found it or not, and whether or not I actually left a travel bug, and what travel bug I picked up. That's if I'm just out for the day doing some geocaching using my GPS. When I am doing those quick little things, it's like, oh look, there's a cache on my GPS, on my car GPS. Let me go find it. More often than not, I am using my smartphone. Most often, I am using the official quote-unquote geocaching app for that, and which I will take care of at that point. If I'm doing a small run, I would actually say, okay, if I have found it or not found it, I would actually type out a clear and concise message. I am not a 4-initial sort of person or even a 3-initial person. FLAs, TLAs, get them at work. I don't need to deal with them when it comes to caching. So I actually will type something out, whether or not I've got any travel bugs to visit it or if I dropped them off or whatever, and I would save it for sending later, or I would send it just then. I've gotten quite good at typing quickly on my smartphone. When it comes to, like I said before, when it comes to using the GPS, I have used both GSAC and iCaching, which is the Macintosh app, to do logging. I'll do batch logging at that point, and I actually will do an individual log for each cache. I am not one of these people who says, this is my vacation, and here's all the caches I found over the course of 5 weeks, all 7,000 of them. That is not me. So I try to make things as personal as possible for the caches. I will send you a link later via email of the one I just found in Monterey recently. I think I forgot to mention I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I think that's about it. And I've done batch results on both GSAC and on caching. Occasionally, I will use the webpage still, although that is very rare. And the only time these days is when I use the webpage is if I need to make a correction, which happens every so often. Say I forgot about a travel bug or something like that, or I go back and look and think to myself, why the heck did I use that word? But that's basically what I do.
All right, thanks for that, Limax. Now, Chris, you were talking about your average lengths.
Mm-hmm.
I just decided to check, and I'm at 33 as my average. My longest is 649. And yes, I actually do have a cache that's a one-word log, and that was the time.
I have a 3-word log.
Well,
so we're about the same there.
Well, what I used to do years and
go
years ago, before smartphones, was I actually used to log just the time from my flip phone through the WAP site.
Oh, wow.
And then I'd go back and edit those logs. So that's one of those that just got away from me, and I never got a chance to log it and discovered it years later. It's like, I don't remember anything about that cache.
Mine was quick find period TFTC. There, 3 words.
This is bad and probably shouldn't do it, but if Susan and I find a cache and we had a bad let's say a bad experience. You can't have a bad experience geocaching, but well, you can.
I was just going to say, don't say that.
We've had some, but once in a while we've had a bad experience, and I'll say, do you want to log that? And she goes, I'm too angry to do it. And I was like, all right, I'll log it. And I will write TFTC, or I'll put TN, took nothing, left nothing, signed log.
Took nothing, left canoe.
I guess I shouldn't do that, because the person went to the trouble of putting it out there, even if it caused consternation for us. But I don't do that as often anymore. It's kind of like not leaving a tip. You got to leave something.
Not if you had bad service.
You are the bad cop.
If I get bad service.
Let's move on to next bit of feedback here from, I'm going to totally butcher this name, I'm sorry, Lante is how I'm going to guess it's pronounced. This holiday I started caching and walking with the family, and since I did not want to ask them to have to wait until I had written the nice log, I jot down some notes on a notebook. I like that so much that I have been doing it ever since. In my notebook, I write the date and time I found the cache, how many I find until now, which cache, of course, and any specifics like a full or wet log, issues with the container or location, etc. Or whether I'd like to give it a favorite point. With my son present, I also write down his cache counts so I know he was present. Later that day, mostly at the end of the afternoon or in the evening, I write the logs online. I love reliving the caching moments, and I think it allows me to write better and longer logs because I don't feel under the gun to finish writing it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I know a few people who actually really get into that, and they actually keep these notebooks around. They'll go out and get the nice journals, and that's what they're using. So that's a pretty cool idea. And one of the things that occurred to me when I read this, was I made a pic of that Polaroid zip printer on the Patreon Hangout, or on the Patreon site, where you actually have these stickers, photo stickers that you can print. How cool would it be to do those journals? In every, cool cache or whatever, you get a photo of yourself, print it off, and stick it into that journal, and keep those on the shelf.
Yeah, that is cool.
That you should turn it into a coffee table book. Come look at my adventures.
Yeah, but it's that one-off personalized thing that would be a great memento that your kids are going to throw away after you die. But it's just cool.
Well, and how often are you going to go scrolling through geocaching.com and looking? Of course, I do this. I'm weird, but looking at old finds that you had and going, oh yeah, I remember that. This way you have something you can actually physically look at. It's kind of maybe is more nostalgic.
It can't be any more nostalgic than the My Finds pocket query. It just warms the cockles of my heart. Okay, let's move on. The Gladiators, it's a clever name, says we primarily cache with GPSR because our data plans in Canada are so expensive. So our logging is done more from home on the computer once we get back. If we're out on holidays, we'll write down the caches we find on a piece of paper and make notes as to if the cache needs maintenance or if it deserves a favorite point. And I have to say, I've been caching with certain Canadians who do the exact same things. So that was the land monkeys. When they're down here, they just simply can't afford the data. So all the cache finds, they need the GC code, and and then they'll write down a tip or two about it just to jog their memory when they get back.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go to one more of these comments from our audience because these are just so incredible. But we are at an hour and 14 minutes right now, so
It's an hour and a half by the time we get done.
Yeah, and Chris has another show to do yet tonight, too.
Oh, I love it. Bring it on. Let's do 2 more.
All right, Gary, so what's our last feedback that we're going to talk about tonight?
We're doing Tentiment. I've been caching long enough, 10 years, hey, me too, to remember when the only option was to wait until I got home to log on and write out, often at great length, the tales of my adventures. There were no smartphones, 3G, Wi-Fi, 3G, 3G Wi-Fi hotspots, or geocaching apps back then. No, there was not. This habit is, for me, still the main way that I log my finds. I cache mostly with a dedicated GPSR, tend to use field notes to record a word or two, enough to remind me what the cache was, which was any NM issues?
Needs maintenance.
Oh, good. Thank you. I kept looking at that saying New Mexico. I then uploaded these straight into gc.com and then expand on the notes. If I'm out for an FTF or a single chance cache, I might log with my phone, but otherwise I rarely log in the field. Generally, I just like caching with my phone for reasons of accuracy, battery life, although also probably because I'm unwilling to change after 10 years. When I started caching, there are far fewer caches around, and so a big day out then included 5 or 6 caches. Amen, that was true. As I had to print out the cache pages, which I did as well, I've had to carry a suitcase to do a power trail. Wow. This means that I was logging only a few at a time, that I could remember individual details more readily. Also, I had time to write much longer logs, something I only tend to do nowadays on those that are particularly memorable or on a personal milestone. Pardon me. It also worth noting that were I to be logging on my phone, see, it's too long of an email. Pardon me. There's no way I'd write more than a sentence or two at best. Also, I'd rather be spending more time, outdoor time, looking up and out rather than my phone screen. While phone apps have undoubtedly changed and improved some aspects of caching, I made it far more accessible, as well as the excellent messenger concept, okay, that have definitely had a negative effect upon the length and quality of logs. I rarely get anything interesting written on my own caches, which can be dispiriting at times, especially if I'd gone to great lengths to make it a special cache.
Yeah, which we've mentioned, but I'm not sure that we can blame that as much on the smartphones. I think it's just kind of the way the game is going with the quantity of caches over the lower quantity and higher quality of the caches. When you have dozens of LPCs for every one regular size container, and you have hundreds of those for every one good cache, Gadget Cache or Great View. I think that's probably what's doing it, because when I got started almost 11 years ago now, if you found 11 caches in a day, that was a big day. Now, we did geocaching day, and that was 100 caches in, I think, less than 9 hours.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so and that wasn't like a power trail.
Well, that's
just
driving right up, walking trails and whatever to get you to the cache quicker.
If you were watching our periscopes, we did a lot of DNFing that day too.
Y'all were relentless that day.
Yeah. So
early to late, yeah.
One of the things that's really great about this email is it does highlight the changes we've seen in such a short period of time in the way that we're logging. If we had done this show, 4 years ago in our beta days, it would have been a very different conversation than it is now. 2 years from now, it's probably going to be a very different conversation again. So once again, I think we have a topic that's going to have to be replayed every so often just to get the updates to what's happening and how this changes. But there's a ton of stuff we didn't even get to this time, because we did have so much great information in this show. So thank you, everyone who submitted your feedback. It really turned this into an amazing show, and I loved hearing your voices. Thank you so much to everyone who did submit in your own voice, and to everyone in general for writing in. This was really awesome, and we've got even more in the live Q&A that we can't get to. So thank you for everyone who's live for some of the great additions that are still in here and unfortunately going to go away because it is an hour and 20 minutes into the show. I think this is our longest show of the year.
Yay!
Which isn't saying much because, we're still on, show 4 or 5 of the year. But, Gary, before we go, tell us more about Cache and Release and how they can find it.
Sure. First, I want to say it was a big thrill for me to be on tonight. I've been listening for years. I need to find when my first episode was, but anyway, I was thrilled to be on. It's a dream come true. It really is. You can find us at Gary at cacheandrelease.com, and the website, of course, is cacheandrelease.com.
And every week you're on that show, helping out Michael Miller, keeping him from going crazy as the solo voice on that show like he used to be.
That's right. I don't know if I'm helping him or if I'm driving him even more crazy having me on.
That might be helping him too.
You're right. That's
helping
possible.
him to drive him crazy.
Exactly.
Right.
All right.
Daryl, did you notice Gary said it's his dream come true to be on? I'm sure that's how you feel every week being able to talk with me.
Well, it is, yeah. But my dreams aren't very lofty.
Okay.
All right, so there's less than 3 weeks to get your questions in for Jennifer of Team AJK and have a chance at a membership to Project-GC, which we mentioned several times in this episode, looking up stats and stuff. Great tool. And for anyone who does want to look up those word stats, because there were a couple of questions in the live Q&A too, that's under your profile stats for Project-GC. Just toward the bottom, if you do a search on words, it will pop right up. All right, so we want to focus on the hider's perspective of puzzle cachers for that show, so please email us at geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com by February 9th at 9 p.m. Eastern with your question. Title the email question 215. Hey, Chris, I'm discounting about 100 episodes. But drop your question in the body with your geocaching.com screen name. Some of the questions we've received so far have been about the number of tips to provide, how to tell when you've made the puzzle too challenging, or how many ciphers to use in a single puzzle. Whatever your question is about hiding a puzzle cache, have that in to us by February 9th at 9 p.m. Eastern, that's 6 p.m. Pacific, to be entered into the drawing for a membership to project-gc.com. Remember, that's question 215, not 100 or anything, it's 215. And that's the email address of geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com. And, we really loved having all of these login comments in your own voices. So if you email an audio file to geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com or call it into the voicemail line at 206-350-3647, you'll get a bonus entry into the drawing. We've already received 4 voicemails for that show, and hopefully we'll get more before that deadline.
Daryl, you do such a great job every week of planning and scheduling these shows. So he always works to get at least 4 to 5 shows in the queue. The next 5. Next week, we're talking with DeBear on one of my favorite, the randomized show. This is randomized 42. It's too late to do math in my head right now. And on February 4th, we're going to be talking about caching ethics with Rock Chalk. This is going to be a really interesting show. It's more going to be personal opinions than actual facts, and it's going to be one of those shows you want to tune in for. February 11th, as Daryl just mentioned, we want your feedback for puzzles with Jennifer of Team AJK. She makes the J in AJK. February 18th, I'm jumping ahead, Daryl, it's a time change thing. We are talking about Cache Series with Lookout Lisa and Kid Vegas from right here in Washington State, I might add. So make sure you tune in to join us those nights. You can always catch us at geogearheads.com.
Check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by calling 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Hoffenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2016 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.
Cash with the Cachemaniacs.